EPA and the FDA has told us that we can sell it right now, but we can't make a profit.
Okay. my camera. Yep, we're on. We're on.
Village Hall, Dane Township Hall, West Point Town Hall, Vienna Town Hall, Lodi Public Library, Mail, and Roxbury Townships. Roll call. Barb.
Yep.
Angie.
Yes.
Julie.
Yes.
Shelley.
Yes.
Stephen. Yes. Mr. Riverfirth is absent, and Adam, yes. Approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Stephen, second by Angie. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0. Public input. Can I get the person while I read this? Citizen input agenda item is for the public to provide comments on any agenda item or to publicly address the Board of Education on items that pertain to school business. The amount of time allotted for each speaker will generally not exceed 5 minutes per person to allow all people an opportunity to be heard. However, the president may modify the time limits at his or her discretion. If the speaker has questions for the board, they'll be duly noted and responded. The board cannot respond to individual questions or individual comments as part. As an additional reminder, the board cannot take action on any item that public input section or on any item that was not posted on the meeting agenda. Citizen input is an important part of the board meeting agenda, and the board appreciates hearing on issues that concern them or our school district. Please state your name.
I'm Becky Colliard.
And then what would you like to say?
Well, just to let you know, frame of reference, my husband and I have 2 high schoolers that go to school in the district, and then we have 2 younger ones. Good evening, board members. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. Tonight I would like to speak in favor of getting our kids back to in-person schooling. My husband spoke Monday night as well, and we will continue to speak up for what we feel is best for our kids until a decision has been made that gets them back to in-person schooling. As the days go by and I look around to see what is going on in our district, compared to other districts, I am greatly discouraged, to put it mildly, and I wonder if you are too. 2 of our children attend a parochial grade school in Madison. We're allowed to go back to school this past Monday. As I walked in the building Monday morning to drop off our kids, what I saw and felt was utterly amazing. There was an energy in the air that was indescribable. The children were overjoyed and the teachers were smiling. So many steps had been taken by teachers, staff, parents, and children to make it as safe as an environment as possible, in turn allowing our children to be able to return. It is a huge sacrifice and a lot of extra work on everyone's part, but they are willing to do it. As I left that morning, I thought, why aren't we in Lodi doing more? As I see other school districts open around us and throughout the state, who also have the health and welfare of their students, teachers, and staff as their top priority, they feel it is safe to open. I ask myself, how come they seem to be able to figure out how to make it work? Somehow we can't. And I ask myself again, why? Why aren't we in Lodi doing more? As I see cameras in school classrooms that allow students to learn virtually if parents have concerns and want to keep their children while still allowing other children to be able to return to school, I ask myself why? Why can't we in Lodi do more? As I visit other schools and see arrows taped to the floor to direct the flow of traffic, makeshift temporary classrooms in empty or unused corners of cafeterias, I see attempts by other school districts to do whatever it takes to get students back to school, and I think to myself, why? Why aren't we in Lodi doing more? As I attend volleyball matches for other schools and see the elation on the athletes' faces, in both teams, the winners and the losers, and I see the pride radiating from them for their school, their team, and for themselves, all of which is possible because those schools have made decisions to return to in-person school. I ask myself again, why? Why isn't Lodi doing more? I realize you have your metrics and have been advised not to make choices based on public opinion. And I have looked at those metrics. I hope you realize that achieving the statuses that those metrics say that would allow for return to school are unattainable, especially if you follow Dane County. With UW-Madison cases spiking, we will never reach that goal. Following metrics like the ones set forth currently show the community that there really is no feasible plan to get back to school, probably ever. This virus is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Those particular metrics serve as a roadblock rather than a plan to move forward. What I and many others in the community want to know is what steps are being taken to get the kids back to school. Other schools are in the same situations as us in communities similar to us. Also have family members traveling to and from Dane County. They have fought to make it work for their schools because they realize the value. Why don't we? I realize this entire speech was based on my opinion, not your metrics, which you have been recommended to ignore. But since my tax dollars are not being ignored, my opinion is actually valid. And my opinion is that teachers are essential in the classroom, teaching our kids safely and effectively. I encourage you tonight and going forward to make decisions and take steps that would actually move towards getting our kids back to school and not put up more roadblocks that make it nearly impossible. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to 2020-2021 school reopening plan.
Yeah, so Tyler, if you could pull up the presentation. So I have a presentation for the board that I'm planning on doing on Monday night. So I appreciate the board better tonight and people are able to hear us. So, but as we share this, first of all, I just want to thank, as we brought up Monday, I want to thank, first of all, our staff for all their hard work and making sure the start of the school year is going well. Our families for all the work that they have done. It's been a heavy lift for families and for families who don't agree with that decision. As we just heard, they still have worked really hard to make sure that their students are getting the support that they need. So we really do appreciate that. This is just some pictures of our first day, their first couple days, different kids working. So we just wanted to share some of those different things that we saw that have been shared with us through different levels. Again, obviously the picture on the right is something we're really familiar with, right? The screen on, seeing faces. And our staff have been and our students have been excited to see each other and interact with each other. So that has been a really important part of us opening up our schools. Just as Becky just got done talking about, what efforts are we putting in place to make sure that our staff and our students are safe, and when we're ready for when they do come back. She mentioned arrows, right? So you go in our buildings, you see them too. You have 6-foot social distancing things on the floor. We have hand sanitizers throughout the building at different spots. Every classroom has hand sanitizer in it. Signage around the buildings, just again, having our buildings talk to us to remind us to wash our hands, wear our face clothes. Another sign. You really can't see, but plexiglass you see as you walk into this building for our more high frequented areas, our offices, in between our staff and students. And then here at the primary school, again, just as Ms. Collier just got done talking about, here's an area where we've put classroom desks that typically haven't had classroom desks that we're currently serving at the primary school level. So I appreciate some of the things we talked about because that is actually some of the things we're working on. We look at our bathrooms. This is from the high school. All of our bathrooms have 3 sinks. So again, to maintain social distancing, we've gotten rid of that middle sink so people can't stand next to each other. We have tape on the floor into our counseling office. Again, there's plexiglass in front of Ms. Trinan to make sure that, again, she's staying safe. Limited of 2 to the bathroom, right? Making sure that we, again, trying to make sure you maintain that social distancing. We have a isolation room set up. So when we have students, if they are sick, this is at the high school. The high school teacher's lounge is now no longer a teacher's lounge. It's just an isolation office. But it also is a spot that has bathrooms and allows us to keep kids who come down to the office who are ill. This one doesn't show up as well, but this is an office too. You can see that there's a, when this person started coming back, people were walking in the office all the time. It's just a good reminder that put a line on the floor. Like, 6 feet social distance, people stop. You don't have to say it anymore. So having your building, again, as we kind of heard, here's again more footsteps, and we use them during our picture day and other times, so again, keep it spread out. And even coming down to water fountains, right? We can still use the water bottle filler, but again, it's been recommended that we don't use the fountain part, so those have all been taped off. So we have taken those steps. We are also working with North American Mechanical, looking at different options, filtering air. We are going to MERV 13. That decision, those have been ordered and are being replaced as we get them. Looking at some UV light options as well for not only filtering the air, but killing virus that's airborne as well. So looking at some of those mitigation efforts. And other things that we are doing, right, that's not so obvious. We are educating people to stay home when they've been sick or they have close contact with COVID. Teaching and reinforcing, practicing hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette. Teach and reinforce the use of how to use a face cover. Ensuring adequate supplies of like soap, hand sanitizer with at least 60% alcohol, paper towels and things like that. Again, the signage that we have up, a ventilation system, modifying layouts of classrooms to make sure 6-foot distance, installing some barriers when we need to, and training staff on all of our safety protocols at the beginning of the school year. Again, we did that this summer with our students, and then with the students we have coming in right now, our EL students, some of our them on those. Increase our cleaning and disinfecting of frequently touched surfaces. Making sure that we're cleaning when we find out that someone has had a close contact with someone with COVID or has been in one of our buildings. We make sure we do sanitization, and then we have limit sharing of objects, working on creating cohorts of individuals, as we talked about in our blended plan, really cohorting kids as much as possible. Try to do virtual events to avoid mixing of groups, so like at the beginning of the year, do online to make sure that homeroom meetings with parents online, so we're not having them come in, and doing as much of that as possible. Limiting group sizes, as we've talked about with cross-country and other things. Limiting non-essential visitors. Right now, non-essential visitors are not allowed in any of our buildings to make sure that, again, we're keeping people safe. And again, monitoring absenteeism. And then we have our staff are required to do a daily health screening and temperature screening and symptom check prior to them coming to work every single day. One of the things that from this point forward, the board is going to have to start doing. I've realized that Monday night that I hadn't talked to the board about that, but that's something that our board members need to do as well. So we need to send that same survey out to the board every week. And again, that's something we did with our students this summer for summer school, something we did with them for BFS and other things. We do with all our staff every day. They have to do a screening. And again, the idea behind that screening is just a reminder of I need to check, right? And it's important that if I don't feel well, I need to stay home. This is our new normal. You walk by the primary school right now and you'll see signs like this on the windows. Part of my role is when I interview for this job is like I'm gonna be out in the buildings. I go out in the buildings and this is what I see. I can't even get in the building, right? So it's like I wanna go talk to somebody, but there's a quiet, I'm recording, right? Or I'm currently unavailable, or knock, and I'll grab my mask and we can have a conversation. So the primary school's done a wonderful job of that signage being all over on the classroom so they can just flip it real quickly and again, making sure that everybody's staying safe, but also not interrupting quality instruction that's going on. So again, I just wanted to talk about at that point, the Department of Human Services had promised us that they were going to come out with return to school, and they were supposed to come out at the beginning of August. And it got delayed till a little later in August, and then it got delayed even more. And then about the middle of August, the Department of Health and Human Services shared information on school reopening and did not have metrics. They had been pulled out for political reasons. Whatever your thoughts about the different things going on at the state capitol, political reasons. That is why they got pulled out. And that is one of the reasons Dane County was caught scrambling at the end, and they did their metric, because they had metrics and were waiting to share them, but they were working with the Department of Human Services and was waiting for the Department of Human Services to come out with theirs first. And then, so there was a lot of complaints about Dane County's coming out late, while they were based well. So really kind of put us into a spot where we, as a school district, have to create our own metrics, which is really hard because I am not an epidemiologist. I didn't play one on TV. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So any of those things, right? So it's really difficult. I do not have master's degrees in public health. So what I have done in looking at putting these things together, what our team has done looking at putting these things together, we have studied people who have done that. And Ms. Collier talked about was Dane County. Yeah, we looked at Dane County, but we've also looked so we looked at a lot of different things to try to get to science behind this. So these are all the different, really what we base this on. Looking at Dane County's dashboards, their reopening plan, Wisconsin's Hospital Association, Columbia County Public Health Department, Georgia Tech Risk Assessment Planning Tool, which is a really cool tool, right? If you haven't used that tool, you can click on it and put a size of the group you're in, and it will tell you what the percent is of the chance that somebody in that group has COVID. So for example, when I started looking at that when we first made this decision, Texas and Arizona were red, like 99%. And they said at that point, they were talking about Wisconsin being about 6 weeks behind Texas. Now Dane County and all those counties around it are about Columbia County, if you're in a group of 100 people, chances of somebody having COVID in that group is 86%. In Dane County right now, in the last 2 days, it's jumped to 99%. So the state of Minnesota has a plan. CDC indicators for school decision making. This is new. This would not have been in the presentation on Monday. They just dropped this information yesterday. So I've included it in the presentation. We'll get to it later, but that's a new piece of information that just came from the CDC. Again, the politics of everything, why the CDC waited till September 15th to drop school opening metrics, I don't know, but that's Columbia County's weekly update. Sauk County's plan for reopening schools. Jefferson County's plan for reopening schools. Harvard Global Institutes of Public Health, Georgetown's model, a school district of Green Bay, and then more Harvard's graphics as well. The other thing is, again, as I said, I'm not an epidemiologist, but all the superintendents in the school have written a letter asking Columbia County for help on this, asking for them to support us with this, because every school district is struggling with this. And the hard part with looking at all those plans is the data, right? So some talks about cases per day, some talks about cases per week, some talk about cases per 2 weeks, some talk about cases per 100,000, some talk about cases per 10K, some talk about cases 100,000 per day, per week. So it's really difficult to look at all those data points and try to come up with a cohesive plan or understand what this model means compared to this model. So for example, one of the examples I would use is of August 12th to August 20th, the number of COVID positive cases. The number of COVID positive cases in Dane County for that were 270, which has a higher case rate. Well, clearly, by the numbers, Dane County had a higher case rate, 272 to 34. But when you start looking at the metrics that we're sharing, is you look at cases per 100,000 residents per day. Well, Columbia County had 8.4 cases per 100,000 people. Dane County had 7.1. So Columbia County's case rate was actually higher. You look at 100,000 residents per week, Columbia County's case rate was higher than Dane County's. Because again, remember, Dane County has 500,000 more people in it. Cases per 100,000 residents for the last 14 days, Columbia County's was higher. And they were pretty similar for a while. Now, that's changed. So to help the board compare this data, I've created data tables for Columbia and Dane County, which I know crossed a few eyes, right? Because it's a lot of data to look at. So this is just for your information. Obviously, this has been in there. You look at, but it really goes down from number of actual cases per per week. And again, this will be updated for Columbia County sometime tomorrow. I'll update. And then the change from the previous week, average cases per day, cases per 100,000 people per week, 100,000 per day, average daily cases, 100,000 over 2 weeks, cases for 10K for 2 weeks, cases for 100,000, average daily positivity rate for 1 week, average daily positivity for 2 weeks. And again, I just did that so you can look at the studies I gave you and compare apples to apples. Because a lot of times people, and we've heard that here, right? We cherry pick data. One of the feedback I got from one of our first board meetings we had about this was Vince cherry picked the online data. And if I looking back, I'd say, yep, that's true. I probably didn't do a very good job. I want to make sure this data is all here, right? So this is Columbia County. And it's really hard to match Columbia County's data to Dane County's unless you do this. So then you switch, here's Dane County's, all the same data, all the same numbers. So like per 100K per day, over 2 weeks. So it allows you to compare the data between the two counties. So which data should we pay attention to, right? Again, heard people come in and say, why do you pay attention to Dane County? So one of the things I did was when we created these metrics is we sent them to Columbia County, who immediately sent them to the Department of Health Services. I got a 4-page email back from the Department of Health Services. 3.5 pages of that was the people forwarding it to each other at the Department. The last one was one person saying, your metrics make sense. They probably, again, just be prepared. You're gonna have to adjust them as we get to know more and more information, right? Nothing's solid with this. And when I first sent it, I just sent Columbia County's data. And the response I got back from the state was, you can't ignore Dane County, a quarter of your students and a quarter of your districts. You don't have to use it 50-50, but you can't ignore it. So that is when the data table for Dane County got entered into this presentation and the other information. Because we have people who worked in Dane County and live in Dane County. So that is what they said. The other piece is the UW-Madison factor, and we've heard that a couple times today too, or today, the other day, and I would agree, right? So one of the things that Dane County is really struggling with is how do you deal with the UW? Because UW numbers have really spiked, right? And it's really easy to blame irresponsible college kids for their behavior. But as I saw in a tweet the other day, some adults decided to put 1,000 kids into a building with 6 bathrooms and thought that was a good idea and didn't think something bad was going to happen. Right? We've been telling people all summer long, don't get in groups bigger than 10, but we put 1,000 in a building and we thought these irresponsible college kids, right? Now, have there been irresponsible college kids? Yes, right? There we have irresponsible adults. And the ones make, just like everything else, irresponsible adults make the news, irresponsible college kids make the news. But that's part of it, right? You put those many people together in a area, you're gonna see some of those things. You get an outbreak. Dane County is really struggling because UW does not, it's not a vacuum, right? They've quarantined some places, but UW is around. And they don't just, it's not like the whole campus is locked down. These kids are still working, volunteer, they go shopping, they go other places. So right now, it's pretty contained on the campus, but they don't know what's going to happen, right? So you can't discount UW's number, but I would also agree that you can't just point to Dane County's big spike and go, well, Lord, I can't do anything because this is what's going on at UW. So that's a piece you have to think about and just be aware of how it plays into your thinking. So one of the things I talk about too is implementation. My recommendation, the board can decide to do what they want to do, but one of the things is we want to make sure we want kids back in school, but that can't be the only goal. The goal has to be to get kids in school and keep them, right? We can get kids in school. But if we have to quarantine classes out or kids out, that causes so much for kids. for daycare for our kids and things like that. So that becomes an issue. So one of the things is we want to make sure whatever metrics we decide on or the board decides on is that we have to meet those metrics. Can't be like, oh, we met them this week, let's go back to school next week, right? Because we've seen the numbers bounce. We need to have consistency. So at whatever level you decide on, if the levels that I have are too low, then push them up. But there still needs to be some consistency. And then give us a couple of weeks where the metrics have to be at that level, and then give us some planning time that, okay, you're gonna be coming back to blended. Okay, well, that takes some change of planning of what we're doing. We can't just flip the switch and become a blended school district tomorrow. And we also shouldn't be jumping from online to fully traditional at any time. There should be a linear progression through that, if that makes sense. And again, ask any questions as we go through this or, so the first metric I put together was based on a bunch of plans. Like I pulled together like here's Harvard's plan, here's Georgetown's, here's the state of here's Dane County. There's no Columbia County. I use Columbia County data, but Columbia County, that's why that's not listed there. And so what I looked at was the positive number of cases per 100,000 over and positivity rates in the counties. And we looked at data from both counties. And I know this is probably easier to see on a screen. It's hard to see on here, but so if we look at low risk metrics, you know, there's not much community spread. There's less than 20 or less cases per 100,000 residents for 2 weeks. And then you go to minimal, and one of the questions the board's gonna be asked is that, do you want these to be ors or and? That changes things. Is it the positivity rate is equal or less than 1% and there's more than 20 cases but less than 50? Or it's an or, right? So that makes a difference in how you look at that. That's why that's an and or an or. So minimal, that puts us back in a traditional setting. Moderate puts us at cases to 50 to 80, puts us back in traditional for K5, and then 6-12 blended. If you look at elevated, positivity rates between 5 and 7% for 2 weeks, 80 to 110 cases over a 2-week period, 4K to 5 blended, 6-12 online, and then high, everybody's online, and then severe, everybody still stays online. So one of the thoughts that I had is, as you look at this metric, a couple thoughts. One is, again, I'm the one who came up with, or our team came up with a 5-6-12 model, right? You don't have to go 4K through 5. You can go 4K through 2. You can go 4K through 2, 3, 6, 9, because we want to talk about different kids who are entering in the buildings and go that way. So that's a possibility. And the reason I did it this way is kids who are in 6th through 12th grade are ones who are seem to be, have researchers shown they're more likely to catch COVID and are more likely to share that virus than our younger students. Any questions about that table? Oops, sorry. The one thing that I would recommend is when we start talking about Columbia, how you fit Dane County, I would look at the metrics as I've gone through this and spent the last month on this, is I would start with Columbia County's data and have that put you wherever it is. If Columbia County's data puts you in elevated, that's where you are. And then you look at Dane County's data, and if Dane County is within one column, you stay with Columbia County's. If Dane County pops you over two columns, then you have to start considering, do I have to move Columbia County an extra little bit? Because now there's, so that, it doesn't, it's taking Columbia, again, that's going back to Columbia County's playing the, but you're not ignoring, if Dane County is really starting to, Columbia County's typically following right behind Dane County in numbers. Obviously not overall numbers, again, because there's 500,000 more people. Just one of the ways to consider of how do you include Dane County's data, but not just follow Dane County's data. So where would we be if we followed this metric, right? So the past 2 weeks, we'd have been at the elevated level. So we would have started the planning of bringing our 4K to 5 back. 612 would have stayed online. However, our case count last week bounced into the high risk range. So everything would have stayed status quo. We would start over. Dane County, the 2 weeks prior to that as well, we would have been at the elevated level again. The last 2 weeks, we've bounced to the high level. Having spent almost a month on this, I was very frustrated when, like, I think we're gonna be back in this 4K blended area, and we bounced. And it's like, oh, I spent all this time on this metric, and now and somebody much wiser than me told me, isn't that what a metric's for? Right? Instead of you being emotionally tied to this is what's supposed to happen, you're making a decision based on the actual data and numbers. The second metric is based exclusively on the Harvard model. And I've seen schools do that as well. And is exclusively based on 100,000 people over a 2-week period, so new daily cases. So this is Harvard's model. If you're 25 new daily cases per 100,000, all learning is remote. If you have between 10 and 25, grades 4K through 5, some type of in-person, might be blended, might be in-person. Consider 4-6 in-person, 9-12 remains remote. 1 to 10 new cases per 100,000, 4K through 8 in-person, 9-12 hybrid, less than 1 case per 100,000, all schools open. Again, average daily cases over a 2-week period, again, based on data from both of those. Again, this is Harvard. So again, this is that metric that looks at where you would fall. And so just kind of walk through, like if you're in the moderate range, it would be, 1 less than 10, put you in a traditional with safety precautions, 4-3-5, blended 6-12. County case rate 10 to 25, 4-5 blended, 6-12 online. So very similar setup. Again, all those hyperlinks are to the expectations of those different models. So where would we be if we use this model? So the past 2 weeks, we would have been at the moderate level in Columbia County. So we would have started 2 weeks planning to bring 4K to 5 in blended and 6-12 in blended. However, last week's case count is so close to elevated, we might start looking at 4-5 blended, 6-12 online based on what would happen tomorrow when the numbers come out from Columbia County. Again, Dane County would have been at the moderate risk level, so we started 2-week planning period. Come back, it is a blended, but then they went from an elevated risk, and this week now is up to the high risk status, so they would be a couple above. So that kind of tells you what this model is a little more liberal, I guess would be the term. I hate to use that term because it becomes a political term, but it's more liberal, where the other model is a little bit more conservative based on all the. This one brings kids back sooner with higher data. Here's a neighboring district's plan, or a proposal. They looked at, they're elevated looking at under 100 cases, they would be all traditional in 2 weeks. 4K through 8 would be between 100 and 200 cases per 100,000 would be in traditional, 9-12 blended. And so you'll see so I just wanted to make people aware that this is what is looking at as metrics. And again, that's the problem. We're all looking at creating our own metrics. But I think you need to be aware of that. So if you look at their metrics in Columbia County the past 2 weeks that have been at a minimal level, so they started 2-week planning to bring 9-12 blended. However, since, as I recommended before, we wouldn't jump from online to traditional, we would start a 4K 12 blended, possibility of looking at traditional after that. And then it talks about Dane County. Looking at that research, those numbers though, those numbers. So one of the other things I looked at is what do we do for a building? Like when we bring students back, how do we decide number of cases for closure of a classroom or a district? And I think it needs to be a little different 4K through 5 than it is 6-12. So what I put down, again, I'm recommending is that when your classroom, when we have 10% of the students or staff in the classroom are absent due to influenza or COVID-19 diagnosis in a 5-day period, or at least 2 students or staff. And we say that because if you're in a blended model, there could be a class that has under 10 kids in it, and to say that we're going to, I don't know if that makes sense. So we put that at 2. And we would close it for a minimum of, go straight to online for a minimum of 3 days, contact trace to make sure who we need to be quarantined, and then we would adjust. It could maybe more than 3 days online, or maybe coming back, just depending on that, what we figure out through contact tracing. However, please note that the county health department may quarantine an entire classroom, right, with 1 case. They may say, nope, you're done. And everybody's out for 14 days. Staff. What I would recommend for the building is when 10% of our students and staff is absent or diagnosis. Again, and the reason I throw diagnosis in there is because sometimes they're asymptomatic, so it's got to have that diagnosis. And again, in a 5-day period, we will move the whole building to an online learning, because we can, again, that's one of the reasons back to online really easily for 3 days, so we can deep clean all the classrooms and we can contact trace and make sure that we are doing our due diligence to keep everybody safe. And then at the district, if we have 3 or more buildings closed, we move to online instruction until we can figure out, because I don't think it makes sense to have to close the high school if we have a couple cases at the primary school. But if we have even 2 buildings, but once you get that 3rd building, then it's like, okay, we need to. But again, that's a recommendation in the district. We can decide whatever way we want to go there. The reason I look at it a little differently for 6-12 is I would use much the same metrics, but please know that when you have a 6-12 model, you're going to have more students traveling, right? In a cohorted model, in a blended learning environment, or even in our traditional model, those kids are in a classroom. They don't leave that classroom. Other teachers are coming to them. Lunch is coming to them. They go out for recess. They have a quarter of the playground that they can use, and they don't interact with other kids from other classes. So it's easier to say this class has 2 cases. They haven't interacted with other kids. At the middle school and high school, that's very difficult, right? Because now you're changing classes. So now it's much more a greater chance at that level that 1 case or 2 cases can wipe out an entire grade level, because it could take your entire staff out. So the example I would use is I have a 7th grade student who, is in a group of 15 or 12 kids, even in a blended model, goes through 5 core academic classes and 2 or 3 specials classes, and then we find out that that person is COVID positive. Well, now all 5 of those teachers, if they've had close contact with that student, and it's hard to teach without having close contact with a student, would be quarantined. So they could teach online from home, but they could not come back in the 7th grade or the whole 8th grade, right? So that becomes a much more positive, or a possibility at that level, 6-12 level, right? So one of our conference schools, that happened this week, right? 3 positive cases, shut down the whole high school for 3 days. And then we'll contact trace and make a decision.
Ask a question here?
Yeah.
Or do you want to just?
You can ask as many questions as you want. That's what you're supposed to do.
So, how many schools, and again, this is just throwing it out there, especially for people listening,
Yeah.
How many schools have started and then had to shut down? Do you have any idea?
I don't have a listing of those schools, so it's hard to
Yeah.
It's hard to quantify that. There is a website that's kind of. But the problem is, right, it's every school that has a COVID case that makes the news, almost. So like I get a news feed. So every day I'm seeing a bunch of COVID cases in the news. But I also know there's other schools that don't have that. So there's schools that have had very minimal or have 1 or 2 COVID cases. Broadhead High School, right, Broadhead, shut down for 2 weeks, right after they started, and then I think extended another week. Lake Mills High School has shut down this week. I talked to a superintendent from central Wisconsin in our CISA earlier this week, and he was asking me about online education, because and I'm like, well, you guys started all in person, why are you calling me? He goes, no, it's been going great. He said, right now, we only have 70 people quarantined. We're pretty good. And they're the same size district as we are. So but it depends, right? And there's other districts that have very few. It's, at our district, we have staff who are quarantined right now. It's not impacting student education right now, because staff are teaching online. But we have staff in quarantine that would not be in the buildings. Again, not because they got it from our students, but again, we don't live in a vacuum either, right? And they have other people in their houses and things like that, so it's a really hard question to answer.
I know, and
right?
it was a hard question for me to ask.
No, it's okay, it's a good question, because that's what people are asking.
Exactly.
Right?
That's what people say, well, you don't have any cases. 14 or 20 people.
Right, so one case can be really easy. So one case, positive case in the community, and it impacts one staff, one family, and that's it. Or you have a family, or you have somebody who, it affects this staff member. Well, that person's a friend with this staff member's child, and that happened, and then this, and then there's a domino of like, oh, this person tested positive, and there's it ends up. So we have to follow Department of Health and Human Services rules, right? So if you test positive, if you have symptoms, you're out for 10 days from the onset of symptoms unless you get a COVID test. And if you have close contact with somebody who has symptoms, we'll ask you to stay out till you have a negative COVID test. If you are in close contact with somebody who has positive COVID, you can't test out of that quarantine. You're quarantined for 14 days. If you have a child who is, so if you're somebody in your household test positive for COVID, if you can separate from that person, so for example, if my wife tested positive and she stayed in the basement and I stayed on my level, or the high level, or more likely I'd be going in the basement and she'd be on the level, but, right? So but we could kind of separate. We wouldn't be really close to each other, right? Cross paths a little bit, but really make sure. I would be quarantined for 14 days. If I have a 5-year-old child who tests positive, right? I can't be away from my 5-year-old child. I need to feed them. I need to make sure they go to bed. I am now quarantined. They are quarantined for 10 days. When their quarantine's up, I am quarantined an additional 14 days. I could be quarantined 24 days. So there's that additional piece. So that's the part. So we have a whole chart that we go through. Again, talk about mitigation efforts. We have a contact tracing plan that we go through, a chart that we have shared with all the administrators. And it's actually our COVID procedures. There's a different chart that has most of the same information that our staff has, that they had to sign off that they got. And then we have to follow certain procedures and policies with the Department of Health and Services, Health and Human Services, to make sure that we're doing it. And I know not all businesses are doing that, right? We have to. Most businesses are, but there are certain businesses aren't, where people are testing and coming back and going to work, and then find out that they're COVID positive later.
Well, the reason I'm asking this out loud is because people are thinking, we don't have any COVID, we don't know about any COVID in our area. But the thing is, we don't know, and that's the whole problem and the whole reason that we are being very careful.
And so like for staff, for example, if I have a positive staff case, I will let staff members know that we have a positive staff. But then I will we will have contact with the people. Remind them, stay socially distant, right? So even like today, we have our meetings, PLC meetings, most of that's done virtually, so we can stay socially distant. So if somebody is a close contact with somebody, or somebody does come down with COVID, they're not taking out a whole team of people, right? That happened in a school district in southern Wisconsin or south, like one of the first weeks of school, like 15 to 20 staff members were quarantined because they were they were together. So we just make sure we have to follow those things and make sure that we are doing our due diligence to make sure staff stay separate throughout all time. So we're only losing, if a staff member goes down for that reason, or they're quarantined for whatever reason, it's that staff member versus others. Now, that's not always possible, right? We have special education kids coming into the building. So kind of go back to track I was saying is that if we have a staff member who would test positive, I will let the district know that happened. And then we will let people who have been a close contact know that they were a close contact, right? We do the same thing with students. But if I have somebody who's in quarantine, I'm not gonna let everybody that need to know that because they're just a close contact. There's not known that there was an exposure there until they're.
Columbia County does the contact tracing primarily, or the school district does?
So the school district will. So that was a change within the last. Columbia County had initially said they were going to do all the contact tracing. Columbia County can't keep up. They can't. They've contracted out with the nursing service and have struggled with that. They have a couple nursing positions open. So if you know anybody who wants to work in public health, Columbia County's hiring. But so they have said any contact, anything that happens in the school, we are responsible for contact, letting people know.
Do we have to hire another person to do that?
Well, it depends. If we have students, maybe. As staff right now, no. We can do it with staff. Because it's not like we don't have to contact trace outside of, just in the buildings. Okay. So who have you had contact? And the reason, again, they want to do that is because we will get to it faster than they will.
Okay, all right.
Right? And so, again, the Columbia County superintendents, when they heard that, really started pushing back until I reminded them, that is what Dane County has been doing for the last 2 months. That's Dane County's rule. Dane County says schools and daycares but you will do the contact tracing in your building because it's quicker. They found that because they were trying to do it that way too, and they found it was just quicker, and obviously notifying people is a timely thing when this happens. So yes, it's a responsibility that our school nurses take. Myself, Tiffany Loken, we are the 3 people that will get called if there's a case end. And right now, Jean Winter, who has been doing a phenomenal job, really has taken the lead on it. But it would be myself or Tiffany or Rodney Burrow, our school nurse.
So are the presentation that we have now, is that going to be sent out?
It was sent out to the entire staff, and it's posted here online. We can put it on but again, it depends on what the board decides, right? If the board decides this is the metric to go with, or something totally different, then we would put up whatever metric they go with. I don't have to.
So people can see
Yep.
what we've been discussing.
Yeah. So this
that was my main concern,
Yep.
that people can see what we were discussing.
Yep. This has been in our board doc, so it's available to the public. It's been available since Saturday morning when I posted it, and still there, so people can follow along and look at all that information. Yeah, because there's a lot of information in there. I know I gave it to the board, and so it's been a lot to look at.
Let's keep going.
Yes. Yeah. So the other thing we talked about was like co-curriculars, like what would. Again, we would start looking at, part of it was like, how big a group are we talking, right? So if it's 2 positive COVID cases and 15, stop it. If there's an activity that's 15 students or less. If there's 15 to 30, we'd talk about 3 positives, and activity of 30 or more, 4 positive. Again, the county could come in and shut it down, or we could, right? Say, nope, we're taking it, there's too much contact, we have to shut it down. But part of it is you have to make sure too is that, we go to number 2, 10% of the students or staff experience influenza or COVID-like symptoms, a diagnosis in a 5-day period. We'll pause a co-curricular, unless it's determined through contact tracing that no other member of the team or activity. So for example, if a team member on Saturday, The last act practice was this Friday. Team member goes somewhere, has contact with somebody who they find out the next day is positive. Well, on Sunday, they're hanging out with another team member. Well, they found out Sunday, when they're hanging out with another team member, I was just in contact with COVID-19. As long as those two are quarantined from the rest of the team, we wouldn't stop the rest of the team, right? Because we know that contact has happened here, they've had no other contact, right? So to say, well, we've had two people who have, so that's why we kind of put that in there, is like, not, does somebody come back, well, we know these two people had it and we're gonna cut it. No, we wanna make sure that we're trying to be reasonable. And again, with all these metrics, it's trying to be, these are just guidelines and trying to be, help us make decisions. Again, staff absences, when we start looking at 10 to 15% of staff this in any building, we would need to go to online, because again, we struggle to get subs. We're struggling right now to find subs for Friday. We need a sub for Friday, and we're struggling to find someone, because we need a couple for different things.
Before you go on, can I also make it clear, because maybe, and you think we know, but other people who are listening may not know, it says influenza and COVID-19 because you cannot distinguish those symptoms from each other.
Yes, right, so that is
they're
why,
wrong here.
yeah, thank you for that point. Yeah, that is why it's influenza or COVID-like symptoms.
Okay, yeah.
So we can't really tell what they are. So until you have a COVID test, then we would have to look at that, so. As I think, I don't know if I referenced this earlier or not, but,
Here they are.
as of today, as yesterday, CDC published indicators for dynamic school decision making. They dropped it yesterday, it just came out yesterday. Which is ironic that this would have came out the day after I presented this to the board. So they really, and again, I linked that earlier in the report, so you can go back and read the whole, it's about 5-6 pages. Really the summary of that is there's no easy answers or single indicator you should follow. Each indicator or combination of indicators should not be used in isolation, hard cutoffs. CDC recommends district use 3 indicators and some secondary indicators. And the 3 indicators, which I was really pleased to see, was cases per 100,000 over the last 14 days, which is what we have in metric 1. Percent positive tests over the last 14 days, which is what we have in metric 1. And then self-assessed measures of school implementation of key mitigation. Masks, do you have hand sanitizer? Do you have hand protocols? Do you have those things? Take into consideration secondary indicators, the percent change in new cases per 100,000 in the last 7 days compared to the prior 7 days. And then the rest really has to do with hospitals and ICUs and availability of those type of things. So just to kind of look at where we would fall with CDC indicators, if we looked at the last 14 days, 100,000 cases at Columbia County we're 9.3, we would be considered a lower risk of transmission in schools by the CDC. If you look at our percent positive testing, we would be considered a moderate risk of transmission in schools. Look at what our increase of cases has been the last 7 days or the 7 days before that, we're in the highest risk of transmission in schools. So again, it's one of those things where it would be really nice if all the metrics would line in one thing, right? And if you look at Dane County, the first 2 flip. 25% or 25 cases per 100,000, their percentage rate for positive testing is lower than Columbia County's. They also test a lot more people. But their increase over the last, obviously, 7 days. So if you look at CDC's recommendations as well. So again, the thing I really took away from CDC's recommendation is we're on the right path of looking at those metrics. Right? So my recommendation moving forward is, and I brought it before, the district follow one of the metrics so decisions are based on data and science. That being said, I don't mean that you shouldn't listen to input of families and things of that nature. But one of the issues that's happened with this pandemic is it's become a political, and the hard part is going through, you see all these different reports. based on data, and having decision points based on data. Now, regardless of where you decide those points need to be, make those points based on the data that's out there, not on, I really want my kid back in school, or I really don't want my kid back in school. One of the things that when I first started putting that first metric together, I started working on that, and one of the things I started doing was like, how do I get this? And a wise man told me, stop doing that, right? And he was right. No, look at the data and put it together the way it should be, the way, whatever the data tells you. So like if you look at our metric 1, at the start of the school year, we should have been in a blended model for K through 5. We're not there now. And we wouldn't have been there when we first started making this decision, but when I put that data together, it's like, this metric tells us we should be back in school. It has now bounced out of that. But again, as I said, that's what a metric's supposed to do. So I worked really hard not to let what decision we've already made cloud that judgment on that. Now, do I have bias going in that? Absolutely. I mean,
Right, but if we would have had this kind of thing,
right,
we would have made a different decision.
you might have.
probably, so.
Yeah. And again, when we made the decision, part of the board's decision was we made numbers were surging in late July, early August, right? And you wanted to make a decision that was in time for families and staff to make the proper decision, right? And that is, and you want to have consistency in education. I would again argue that districts should pay closer attention. My thought would be like, this is maybe a way to do it, but there may be other ways. If the district chooses metric 1, that the district uses that or feature, so an and, so it makes it opens up a little bit more. And then as I talked about, that there's like it's not that we switch, oh, metric's good, we switch tomorrow. There's some staff can prepare. So if I look at where we are with recommendations to Columbia County data, so if you look at this presentation and you want to look at the data tables, look at these 2 data tables, because I've highlighted the data that we're talking about versus all the rest of the data. So, and same with Dane County.
And these are color-coded to match the earlier.
The different models. So the yellow one is off yellow is metric 2. It's just on daily cases per. And again, you can see that if you start looking at these models, you can see Columbia County, how their data was average cases 100,000 over 40. It's been pretty steady, and it's starting to come down. So we were worried it was kind of higher, and it was come down, and now it's shot up, and it's going to shoot up a little bit more based on what I've been looking at. Cases per 100,000 for 2 weeks. If you look at metric 1, again, we're coming down to the 105. This is Columbia County, right? But the testing percentages was still pretty high. Then you look at Dane County's numbers. Again, their numbers were at 119, where it's exactly the same between both counties. These numbers were very similar, and then Dane County started to see a spike. And again, Columbia County started to see a spike. This is like UW and Labor Day all put together. And their test positivity rate has really gone up. They were down in below 1, much lower than Columbia County's. But again, they have a testing center, a free testing center. They're testing more people. And say if we look at these daily rates, again, very good for Columbia County or Dane County, even though the numbers sounded a lot. When you put it per 100,000 and you average it out, their numbers were very similar to Columbia County's. There again, 500,000 more people. So again, some of the guiding principles for making this decision that we talked about all along: safety of our students and staff and families are number 1. We have to stay grounded in high quality teaching and learning, and operational effectiveness, making sure we're not doing long-term damage to our flexibility, right? We reserve the right to be flexible behind these gating criteria. become more and more, we learn more and more, right? We learn more in 6 weeks than we knew 6 weeks ago. As we learn more and more, we may learn that there's one of these factors, something that we should really look at even more closely. Or, you know, a vaccine may show up, or rapid testing may be available, and we can start doing some.
Rapid testing is coming out. Can we get it is the other question. But then if you get a positive case, you rapid test every.
Right. Yeah.
We just got, it's availability.
The other piece, I don't know if I have it on here, is really behind any metric that we decide on, the idea is we don't want to bounce around, right? We use scientific data to make decisions. We don't bounce, because that's, as I mentioned before, some districts in our state have started out really well. And others have sent entire grades home. You know, the night before, I call you, the superintendent calls or sends an email out. Your child's first grade classroom is now on quarantine.
It's not a snow day, it's a COVID 3-day.
Yeah, so
Which might turn into a COVID 14-day.
Right, so, and then it's back to online,
Right.
right? So, and we need to have time to plan, like, right, so lessons that we do right now, if we're in person, to turn around and plan, and, you know, we would work really hard to have a quality online program. But that consistency is really important for, not for 2 days or a week, or, because again, we talk about the social emotional well-being of students, and their social, and being in school is much better for them. But being in school and then getting yanked back out of school, or back and forth, or seeing classmates go, or see teachers being out, not good for them either. So again, we want to make sure we're balancing that. We don't want to just bring kids back to school. We want to bring kids back and keep them in school. And that's the piece that we need to make sure. And we also have to look at, like, when we look at other models, right, there's other pieces. The online instruction that we have now for our kids will not be the same as it is now, right? Because in a 4th grade classroom right now, the 4th grade teacher is teaching online instruction, and she or he are having whole group meetings and small group meetings and things like that. Well, if I have 12 of my students here and 12 are at home, the 12 at home are doing things, but there's no teacher interaction. It's back to kind of where we were last spring, online. Now, you're giving up that online education, the quality that we have now, but you're also getting that in-person piece, which is really huge. So there's a domino either way, right? There's a give and take whenever you make
list
those
of pros and cons for each.
Yeah. And then the other piece I would say is we need to go as fast as we can, but as slow as we must, right? So that's the hard part, right? We all want to go fast, but we need to do this well, right? It doesn't help us to push kids back into school and then have them be back out in a week, but it doesn't help us just to constantly drag our feet and not try things either, right? So that's the balancing point for me. So
I had a thought that maybe we should just that down.
I was thinking
Move
primary
on to
too.
the next one.
What's that?
I said
Focus
with,
on the
right, so
okay,
like
good.
if we're talking about trying to do the blended, we totally focus on primary. And we try to get that started well. And then just kind of build on that, because.
Compartmentalizing
Yep.
the levels.
That's what I would
working
think
up
too.
that.
So
And
you're
the
kind of breaking it down
Yeah.
instead of trying to take it all and.
Some of these metrics were,
Right.
like you said, we can change this, but talking about,
Right.
there's a lot of pieces into these
Yeah.
metrics, like.
And the research would support starting with the younger kids, right?
Right. Right.
That's what research would show is the kids who are not sharing, even if they get the virus, are not sharing it as much. Not quite sure why yet. And again, that research could change, right?
They did yesterday,
There was-
didn't they? There was a study that.
I think 10 to 19 was the age. Younger than 10?
Yeah,
Oh,
she's talking younger.
sorry.
That's just the thing, is the data's changing all the time,
It is.
and it's not ever changing in the right direction.
So
It's,
they're not changing. We know more
Right, we know
and
more.
more and more.
sorry, Professor.
It's the
So-
same data being built more and
So
more.
when we metric, then, would be monitoring the data as it's coming in. Then, at a point at which it was meeting the cutoffs, we're not waiting for a board meeting, or we do, no. So
No.
this is talking about a thing that, like, that would automatically be triggered by the data going forward without us having to, without having to wait for a board meeting to say,
Right.
start planning, right?
Right, that's the idea, is that you choose some metrics for us to follow, and then you give us, well, we would have the authority then to make it, because we don't want to wait till a board meeting,
Right,
right? Or have to
right.
call a special board meeting to make that decision, or vice versa, right? Like, we have an outbreak in school, we gotta call a board meeting so we can close school. Well, that's not gonna happen, right? So either way, you don't want to have it, but we need guidance on how you want us to go, how conservative or liberal do you want to be? Again, taking the political pieces out of those terms, want to be a little more wide open and, have the numbers be higher and bring our school kids back, or like, administration, that number is way too high, we're not acceptable, we need to pull that number. Or you're just saying, you guys kind of have a good idea where you are? Or, because that's a really hard, because I mean, there's no really like, well, this is, kind of like CDC said, there's no number you can just go, well, this is the number. Right, because there's other factors.
So I know there's many factors involved into moving into, and some of those are just too logistical to really enter this discussion. But for families who would potentially choose to stay online, I mean, obviously, we're going to be providing more information about what blended would look like, and the families are already getting information right now about how virtual looks. Are we going to have a date that they need to tell us that they want to stay virtual, or a commitment to it? Because,
Yes.
as we've discussed, we've got a plan
Yep.
for moving.
Yeah, so what we would do, and we had kind of a conversation about sending something out last week, but I didn't want to send it out before the board meeting, right? I also don't want to give anybody false hope, like, hey, they're sending out a survey about coming back to school. No, that's not. But I do need we need to send something out that's, we're considering this, right? And if with everything going on right now, would you have your child come back into a blended setting, some setting? Choose online, understand that online is for the rest of the semester, right? Because we need to plan. I can't have kids bouncing
No.
back and forth. Because to be honest with you, if you look at our online instruction right now, 5 level, depending on how many people we have go online, we can probably continue what kind of, if they go online, right? Because if I have 20% of my family say, in 4th grade say, nope, we're staying online, well, I can reshuffle my classes, and other teachers are going to be working in blended, and that online instruction for those kids isn't going to be quite as robust, but they're also getting some in-person. It becomes much more difficult at the 6-12 level to do that online piece in a quality fashion. But it's really difficult if we don't make them commit to one of those things, because now I say, okay, I have these 4 teachers, and I'm going to take, and 10 of the kids 2 weeks in go, nope, we're going back in person. Well, now I'm stuck. Like, now I got to hire a teacher, right? And it becomes a significant, so in talking to some districts, that is what they have done. They have said, you, for a certain length of time, like.
I totally agree with if you're going to go online.
I mean, again.
Well, as we were discussing in the curriculum committee, that parents need to have a very robust understanding of what blended looks like compared to what they're getting right now. There has to be just a real good understanding of what that could look like, so that.
Because it's different, it's different than what we have now for the kids, yeah.
I kind of have an issue with that. So if I, as a parent, decide that my kid, but in 5 weeks it starts to look pretty good again, I can't send them back to school. But I would have a feeling that if, you didn't say this, but I'm guessing this is true, if I'm a parent that sends my kid to school and then all of a sudden 2 weeks from now says, oh, no, I don't want to do that, I'm pulling them out to video, we'd have to let them do that.
We would have to let them do that.
Yeah.
So I think we need to stress the importance of it, but I feel coercive.
Great, but on top of all that, if we adopt a plan, people can look, so previously, we didn't have a plan. We didn't have any metrics.
Are you talking about the metrics, the plan, the
No
metrics
metrics.
plan, right?
And so people said, well, I'm not sending my kid because I don't know what you're gonna base your metrics on, right? And so you could have really high case numbers and that's not safe for me, so I'm not sending my kid. But now that you have metrics in place, parents can look at this metric and say, I agree or disagree with that, and decide, I disagree with this, I'm keeping my kid online. I agree with this, so I'm gonna let it happen one way or the other. This allows people to make a decision based.
I don't think this
Good
is
or
a sticking
bad.
point, so I don't want to take.
No,
the
but
long way on this,
I have the same concern, right? So when I started writing some things about this, it's like, how do I do it? And like, do I make them, and I think we get to the second, you're committing to both. And I'm like, I don't know if I can make you commit to being in school. Call it other districts number where you have 450, you're still in person. And a lot of our families are like, no.
I guess what I would say is if we are going to go that direction, and I wouldn't argue against it if we kind of productive, it needs to be done as close to when the school. If you ask me today, I'm going to give you one answer,
Right.
no matter what the metrics are.
Right.
4 weeks from now, I might give you a totally different answer.
Right, and it might be, again, the conversation is, follow Julie, what she was talking about, then 2 kids, second grade kids, or maybe you're just doing it with the elementary kids versus the.
Well, and it's the other thing I was going to say is that, because I guess it's kind of the same thing that Julie's saying, but I first of all, I think metric choice number 1 is a very good path and well thought out. Thank you for putting that together. And I think there's some rules with that that go along with that, which is that we don't shift the whole school district to one.
Right.
I just don't think we can do that,
Yeah, no.
right?
Too much.
So no matter what, if the metrics say, if all of a sudden things got better over the next 2 weeks and things look got to the point where we could bring everybody back blended, I think that's a bad idea for us, just because I think mechanically we can't do that. We can say we're going to sequence it 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks.
Right, I think part of that is all the way back to July. So we decided to do the online thing and get that. Now we're to the point where we've got data we can use. So now let's plan for the primary school. How do we plan that? And you move to the next logical one, which would be the elementary school in OSC. And then you get those 2 under your belt working well. And then you go on from there. And we know that, I think from what I've heard from several 6 through 12 online right now, the way it is going quite well. For some. I mean, not for everybody, but overall. So, I mean, it's just, it's like Apple releasing a new phone or whatever. But, let's do a slower release.
They actually didn't.
Yeah, they
Which
released
is what
a
everybody's
watch,
pissed
a
off about,
phone, they, actually 4 things. But, by breaking it down that way and by doing it, we also gain confidence. We gain confidence with ourselves, with the teachers, that it can work, I guess.
Okay, I have a thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so, so my thought was also, as Stephen was saying, you know, what if we had, like you decided you were online, but you would rather go back, right? What if we had, according to semester, or according to quarters, first quarter, at the end of the first quarter, if you wanted to switch, that would be a good possibility of switching, instead of, I chose this, but this is not working for me, then people are not gonna just fall to the floor. But if we had it at quarter time, and somebody else wanted to shift, that would be a good time, I think, to change people. 3 might go out and 5 might come in. But if we did it at the quarter, and we knew that the quarter was coming up, and you kicked it, you were awesome, or you were not good and you need to shift, that would be a place to shift. And then we have a good compromise going. So if you're not working, we can move you somewhere else. So that's my thought on moving people if it's not. That would be a place that everybody would have, you know where the quarter is.
Right.
To be honest, looking at all the surveys, I think you've got two polarized groups that aren't gonna change.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So
And then you're gonna have the few in between.
I mean, things can be changing
Yes, but
COVID-wise. If I,
Yes.
you know, as there's parents out there, you know, probably a lot of people, you don't know what you would want. You want your kids to be in school and
Right.
healthy. And so nothing is certain. None of these metrics are going to keep everybody 100% safe. But you want your kids in school, because
Right.
being in person is better.
We know.
right.
Let me go back to what Julie was saying, and I don't disagree with. See why the break is 4K through 5 and then 6 through 12. 12, you can take out a large number of people.
Right.
In the lower grades, you're taking out just your class. So if we bring back the primary school and I'm in 3rd grade, my kids are in 3rd grade, I'm feeling jilted because the metrics are good. Why are my kids not coming back? And those kids get to come back. So that's just I could hear parents saying,
So where's the break, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Is it 5 or is it 2? You know, like, is that kind of what we're?
I agree that those younger kids need to be back. Those are the critical ones. But again, if we do 3 through 5, you're only taking out those classrooms. Like in 6 through 12.
I wanted to say along the lines of what Andy, making sure parents totally understand what a plan. We also have to make sure they fully understand what that means,
Oh, yeah.
because it's not anything that they're expecting. In a district that's open, I've never worked in a school that's so quiet. I don't see kids like at all during the all day long. They're eating lunch in their rooms, going to recess, but on this part of the playground, there's no movement. No, playtime in kindergarten is play on your own, not play with your friends. I want to make sure parents understand that too, because that is a whole part of the.
Is it working, Barb?
Well, kind of. I mean, we're starting to get now, but I mean, I think there is some prep you have to do of. I mean, I think kids are used to masks, but maybe not. Table that's got plexiglass dividers between you and 4 other kiddos. A lot to take in when you're.
So whatever we send out on these metrics should say, this is what this is, this is what this is.
Right.
In detail.
Kind of an update on the.
We'll have to describe what that is, right? What's back to school, this is what it looks like,
Right.
right? This is what the in-person part will look like. Online or at home, and that's why if you look at them, it's not called online, it's at, right, in our
For the other
plan,
2 days.
versus online activities. It's at home, because it might be online, but it might be just things that you brought home. But yes, we would have to describe that in much more detail.
But I still think we need to have an option on a space if they wanted to move, because we're gonna,
Oh, yeah, I wasn't saying in no way, like, no, we shouldn't be.
No, it's
I just, it's, if you're not inside the reality, I don't know that you're fully prepared for what.
right,
Well,
exactly.
and to speak to that, our daycare at the primary school has pulled out of the primary school because they could not follow the school rules. I mean, it just wasn't working for them,
Yeah,
for their families, for their kids. Like, they're like, this is not what we signed up, our kids have signed up for. We want our kids, we had some parents say, you're making them wear a mask, sit apart in schools. They've taken a pause. They're still gonna pay their rent up there, and they're taking a pause to see how things work out. But right now, they are not bringing kids into the primary school. They are struggling to, they're struggling to follow the rules that our kids would have to abide by if they come back to school. And we had kids this summer who did that, right? And some kids did really well. The guys and girls did really well. Others found every reason to empty their water bottle so this mask was off, right? Or I walked in as the superintendent, and the first, you're supposed to stay 6 feet away. Come look at this, come, and you're boom, you're sucked in. You're like, oh yeah, tell me about this, because that's what you do as a teacher. Yeah. And it says, it doesn't have to be little kids, it's adults. You're teaching adults to do the same thing, right? You're older, you're helping them. Like, even if I was trying to do it with my children at home, trying to teach, I would have close contact throughout the course of a day. But yes, that would be something, whatever we put out was described, right? And this is what it looks like, and this is what the parents, and then having them make a choice. It depends on when this decision is made and when we go there, because the quarter ends in November. And then the next quarter is really long, versus those decisions.
Well, I was got to that too, is that we've kind of, what we have said, what our motion is, the 4th of November. In my mind, it would take a major turnaround for us to consider doing for that.
We'll just simplify them, even if we adopt.
This doesn't look like it either, right? But
Right, you mean like.
Well, again, that metric number 1 was, you were looking at getting into a 2-week planning process of, we could come back in 2 weeks until this last spike.
I guess that's what I'm saying, is that to me, I thought we were talking about this metric once the November 4th date was passed. How do we make that decision?
And that's a decision, right?
Or how do we make that at November 4th so that those plans?
Well, you're right. I mean, I think in my mind and in a lot of people's minds, like, it has been settled through.
I think parents are counting on that, except for the ones that put us back in.
Yeah.
Well, and then, but then we have a commitment to getting back in place when it is, the metrics say that we can, so.
I would like us to see us move forward, because we have our November already situated, so that would already,
I think it's the 6th, but
or whatever the date, yeah.
the 4th is the
First week in
election.
November.
The 4th is the election.
Oh,
and it's the
maybe
6th.
that's why that's stuck in my head, yeah.
We need to figure it out tonight.
No, we need to figure it out tonight, and we could even say that, I especially if we're gonna stage things like we're talking about, if we stay on this course and things look good, and the 2 weeks prior, we wanted to start bringing some levels back, I wouldn't argue with that too much. But I do, we've said it all, and we've cautioned it all before, but in my mind, number one, the blended model, no matter how good we are, this isn't an accusation on all of them. For parents, for students, it's not gonna be a pleasant experience, and it's not gonna be convenient, and it's not gonna be logistically manageable.
Well, then what
Having
should we
said
do?
that, we have to do it, because we're
Yeah.
not gonna go from, I'm not saying that, but I would like to see it that when we make that decision to do that, it's a decision that
Ideally, that we would see that the numbers of the metrics surrounding us
Yep.
are also moving in the right direction, so that the
And I realize that may be an impossibility, but I just really think, I agree with everything you guys have said. I don't think parents understand what the blended models feel like for them, because it's 2 days on, 2 days off, and it's really 3 days off. And it's gonna flip, right? So it's not gonna be the same 2 days every week. So it's not like you can go to your employer and say, I need every Monday and Tuesday off.
I would say the same, no, it's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, so you're in a group on Monday, Tuesday. So that's the plan we have, I mean, we talked about it a little bit.
We talked about several.
I mean, there's options, right, you can do Monday, Tuesday, one group on Monday, one group on Tuesday, then that same, you know.
A little bit
Or
better.
you could do half day, but for us, we went with that Monday, Tuesday, one group, Thursday, Friday, because the cohorts and better, you can clean in between those groups. That's
Yep,
what you
no,
do that Wednesday for.
I get why we're doing it, and it has to be done that way. But, you know, you think it's hard to get daycare now when you go and say I need daycare for just 3 days a week,
Exactly.
you're not gonna get it. And it's just,
Well, and
it's a,
that's, I'm sure a lot of people are having that like question in their minds right now, like, well, should I even want this? Should I even consider sending my kids? Yeah, obviously a lot of people are like, yes, any human contact would be better than not.
But you also have parents who are making the argument like, I want to make that choice,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I don't want you to make that choice for me, I want to make that choice. Do what I have to do.
exactly. And I think these are necessary steps, but I think when people are talking to us about this and we're getting all these emails, that these are the things that are weighing on us. It's not just simple, do I believe in COVID or not, or do I believe it's dangerous? We have 1,500 kids almost in this district that have almost as many family units, because some of them have 2. Everybody's different. Everybody wants something different. And the scary part for me, and this is the same from July till now, and you guys have said, we cannot bounce back and forth. It needs to be, when we have a fairly good feeling that we're gonna move to the next step, and then within a few weeks or a few months, we're not going back. And the metrics, I think, are what the metrics are, and it's what we've got. The only thing that's missing in these metrics, there is a little bit of gut feel in this. You know, because the metrics tell you what's happening today and what happened over the last 2 weeks. But there's also like a sense, like you said right now, if we look at the metrics, we'd be planning to bring back our.
We would have, but we also knew, I mean, coming in, one of the 6 weeks ago, at that meeting was what's gonna happen, and I don't remember if that meeting was specific, but what's gonna happen with Labor Day, right? This is what happened at Memorial Day, this is what happened at 4th of July, what's gonna happen after Labor Day? And then what's gonna happen, and as we talked with, I talked with the Dane County Superintendent's Group, what's gonna happen after August 15th, after all these kids come back? And the numbers are gonna spike, and that was before Madison had closed down 312, or Dane County had, you know, and are we gonna plan to have something in person and have it close? Again, we're not in, for our buildings, but we still look at their guidance. So you're right, and one of the other conversations we had was, conversation at the time was, look what's going on in Texas, look what's going on in Arizona, look what's going on. Wisconsin's trending, if you look at their data, we're 6 weeks ago, Texas is right where Wisconsin is now, right? And now you're starting to see, as I said, if I look at that one map, all the red is.
That's what I'm saying, is you can look around and say, right now, it's not getting better. And as far as, because some people are gonna say this too, but as far as, if we decide the first week in November to make a move, we're gonna be sitting here saying, well, what's gonna happen at Thanksgiving?
Right.
When everybody gets their families together and spreads. And part of this has to be said is that this is all contingent on how people act in public.
Exactly. We can have as many metrics as we want,
Yep.
but I think we have so much information. I think we've talked it over. I think we should work on starting on a plan to go somewhere or not go somewhere.
Wow, Shelley's wanting to move us along. We better move along.
Well, I was gonna say, the other thing that's not really in the metrics, staff absent. You know, so say it's November and we're talking about this and the metrics are looking promising, but we are having large numbers of community cases of whether it's COVID or influenza. So again, we want to keep the buildings open so that if there's a illness, I mean, not I factored into the metric, but it part of that.
But, and I think that's where that last slide was like talking about right? So even though the metrics may look good county-wise, but we have buildings being closed down, right? So that, you're right, because no matter what we do for a metric, there's gonna be outliers that we can't control and look at that. Or at any time, we can't staff a building, we're gonna have to close the building, right? I can't staff it. I can staff it from online, but I can't staff it in person. We're gonna have to look at closing parts of it or all of it. And again, I can't control or predict what's gonna happen. But I can tell you right now, I mean, we haven't been in school cases in the school district of Lodi. I shouldn't say it. We have 80 students in, right? And whether those will impact our students, I don't know. You know, there are COVID cases. 95 students in.
95 on Monday.
Yeah.
95 students who are being served in person.
In person, yeah.
Yeah, we gotta,
Not
we
95
gotta do more.
positive.
95 what?
Yeah, well, the metrics are a starting place.
Yeah.
And metrics are a good starting place.
But I think the two questions you have to ask are these metrics something that we should use as the guide, not that they can't be adjusted, but this is the starting point. And then B, when do we want to start applying them? Do we want to wait till the November 6th? Or is it something like we start, again, we're a month away from, if you look at that, if you use that metric, right now we're a month away from anything. And I'll,
Yeah, so we're
and
only
seeing
6
what
weeks.
Columbia County's numbers have been the last couple days, we're a month away probably starting from tomorrow at least, because those numbers are going to be high, so we'll have to wait till next week. Hopefully those numbers will up for a few weeks. And I think you're right, Stephen, part of that's, we talk a lot, I've had a lot of people talk about wanting to be in school. We need to start acting as adults like we want everybody back in school, and that means, but again, it's a choice, right? So it comes down, and I think it's kind of, as Angie said before, people look at your.
Well, first of all, I think we should correct that thinking that those of us in this room and all of your staff, all throughout the district, want the same thing.
Oh, no.
And we're acting like it. And you pointed it out in this thing. I'm not at you. I think this is something in general that this perception that we're just throwing up road. It's not us. This is where I was going before. It's not us. We didn't create COVID. We're not the ones out not following the mask mandates. We're not the ones out having fake proms or fake homecomings. We're not the ones out doing these things. We're trying to get everybody back into school. We need the community to help us help them. And if it's not evident enough, which I know it's not because everybody's quarantined.
Yep.
Yes.
We're
Tons.
we're doing everything we can to make this happen. Not at you guys, but this is the thing that just really gets my goat, is that we have all been spending exuberant amounts of time. I'm not looking for sympathy, but I'm looking for acknowledgement that we're doing our part and we want these kids back in school.
There was never a time we didn't want the kids back in school. We wanted to put them in, we want the kids in school. We have always wanted the kids in school. But we want the kids in school safely, that we can go to sleep, or personally for me, so I can go to sleep at night and not be all upset over this, because it's very frustrating.
Sorry.
I'm out.
No,
Shelley out.
It comes back to, I think, what was said before. Like, us talking at this meeting is not changing too many people's opinions, right? So there are people in the community, and probably in our families who say, this is the way it is, COVID's here to stay, you just gotta deal with it. It's a risk you're taking by living, and there's nothing we do about it, just be fine. And there's others who feel like we need to take steps to protect not just ourselves, but those around us, as much as possible. And none of us are perfect in either one of those camps,
Yep.
right? So we all make decisions that bounce into those other camps. Like I'm not perfect with, you know, what I need to do as well. But there are people who are really like, it's here, and you guys are way over the top. There's others who like, you guys aren't taking it seriously enough, right? And I don't think you're convincing any of those. So bottom line, it comes back to, at least for me, I gotta convince myself what the best decision, because that's my job. What is the best decision I can make, not only for the students, for our staff, and for our community, right? That's the role I've changed from. Now it's more about, I need to look also what's best for our community long-term and health-wise and things like that. So, again, and trying to put that in a way that's based in the information that's available from people who do this for a living. Doctors and technologists and people in public health and those type of things, because that's what they do. We're gonna just talk about third grade reading. I'd be talking to Nick, right? Dr. Carls would be my man.
Read at a third grade level.
Well, I'm just saying, right? So, because he's an expert in that, right? He's got studied it all his life, and I would go to him because he's an expert, right? I'd ask Nick about public health. He's not an expert in public health, right? So, and we're having to make decisions about public health, and we're not experts in it, and we're not getting enough help, right? So, and that's just the way it is. I mean, I'm not complaining about that either. It's just, so our decisions are not gonna be perfect, because this is not, and we don't have time for Vince to go back and get his doctorate in that, because hopefully COVID will be over by then.
You're not getting a raise anyway.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying, you know, well, I probably would.
Well, not from here.
I wouldn't have to work here. I wouldn't be working here. Yeah, so, it's just, it's a really, as I said about the stadium project, the board often, it really struggles between a right and a right decision. As I said earlier tonight, this is a different situation because you're struggling between two really decisions that feel wrong, right? Because you have been given a bad hand. You're dealing with a pandemic. You don't have a whole lot of support outside of this, from other agencies outside of this room.
Willing to take a stand on it.
Right, so behind the scenes they are, right? Or if I they're not gonna tell me, or they're not allowed, right? So when I talk to, push the Department of Health Services, they will go a little bit and then they'll say, that's overstepping our bounds, we cannot tell you that. That is wrong, in my opinion, that public health can't tell me that, because they know that stuff, but that's where we are. So that's what has put you in this situation. So, and regardless of whatever decision you make, it's gonna, and we talked about this before, some are gonna be happy with it, some are not gonna be happy with it, some will be, you know,
Well, let's take this one step at a time. I will make a motion that we accept the metric with using or instead of and, at least to start with, as the basis for making decisions going forward. Separate motion of when we start to apply that, if you want.
And I'll second Stephen's motion. So there's a motion by Stephen. Further discussion. Can I say something really quick? So I went through all these plans in great detail. And what Vince put together here, it makes perfect sense based on what was in that information, so.
For us.
For us, yeah.
For us, yeah.
At this time.
For these people in this room.
There's a new term too, it's called, is it COVID fatigue?
Yes.
Those are the people that don't care anymore. They've got COVID fatigue, so it's an actual,
I have a different
Thing.
COVID fatigue.
Yeah.
I guess.
I'm fatigued and
Well,
COVID, but I
we-
still have to care.
again, our cross-country coach talked about that the other night, right? Just being exhausted and then asking him, like he said, he came back one more time, because he asked his athletes to dig deep at the end of a race and stuff like that, right? Problem is, we're not at the end of the race,
Right,
right? We're at the bottom of the fourth inning, which
right,
is
but
hard.
there's a lot of people that have just given up.
And understand, I mean, it's hard.
Our jobs don't allow us to give up.
Exactly. Okay,
All right,
Further discussion. So currently it's 4K through 5 and 6 through 12. Do you want to discuss that further? Are you okay with that?
Personally, I would almost,
so
Should
wait
we
a
see
minute,
if we
are we
can do that?
voting on
we're discussing.
the metric?
So there's a motion to adopt metric 1, 6 through 12. So now we're
Didn't Steven
discussing
say he
that.
was gonna talk about that separate?
Separately?
No, he was talking separate about when to implement this plan.
But I think the, I
We
think you
can-
could,
We
you
can
could say
discuss
this
all the
is.
details of this now.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
Yeah, the way I see this is we would use the same metrics. How the administration chooses to open the school's timeliness is really an operational thing, and I'm not sure it's up to us.
Oh,
I would
that
argue that
changes.
point also.
Okay,
We may
that's,
feel it's wise to get the early youngest ones in first.
And the metrics are kind of set up that way, but you're, we can definitely make our opinions known.
Well,
It was like sports. We don't know how to set up sporting events and how many people. So we leave it to people who know how to do that.
But I would
I
even
guess-
say like, we're not, when I think of how our district is set up, I don't think of a,
me too. 3, 5,
Right.
6, 8.
right, so I mean, I'm saying like, I'm good with them.
I think a lot of it is we want people to be able to plan.
We had that discussion, whether it should be 4K5 or 4K2 and 3.5, and consensus was it should be 4K5. Now, that doesn't mean we can't, as we get going into it, change that. But in this metric, when I shared this metric with that was one of my questions I asked them. Straight out was like, I want your feedback on this. Again, for some of the reasons that were brought up, like,
You're only
I have a
taking out
third
grade.
grader. Why, how come my second grader can come to school but my third grader can't? Was, when you get to sixth grade through 6 through 12, it also takes some of the daycare things out of the picture, right, for families, right? So if you're talking about relieving families, it's that 4K through 5. If I have a fourth grader at home, I can't really I can leave my sixth grader at home and give her some way that she can contact me and I can deal with that.
I think you have to speak louder.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
You're,
Mobley?
you're not projecting,
He is
sir.
He's got COVID.
overworked.
I
No,
know.
so,
I know.
sorry, so I'll say that again. So, we as an administrative team had this conversation and looked at 4K through 5. And I asked them very clearly, should we look at 4K through 2 or 4K through 5? And we came to a consensus to do 4K through 5 for many of the same reasons that were brought up tonight, like daycare, right? So my fourth grader, I can't leave home alone. My sixth grader, depending on the sixth grader, I might be able to with a phone, or they can get a hold of me, or connect to a neighbor or something like that. So we looked at just that issue of 4K through 5 of, I can bring my second grader, but I can't bring my third grader. It kind of, that sixth grade kind of made sense. Not that we can't, again, look at it as if we want to ease it in, and that's kind of what we looked at when we talked about it. It wasn't unanimous, but it was at the consent.
So how does the busing look to do that?
So that's the other question, right? So busing is something we will have to work with our bus company on. Even if you go to a blended model, you're probably going to be running full routes just because of spacing you're needing. We would look at kids having a sign, again, with transportation, that kids would have assigned seats on a bus. That way, and the reason we would do that, I have to explain that, is the reason we would have that is if somebody comes down with COVID who's been on the bus, If I don't have assigned seats, I probably have to quarantine the entire bus. If I have assigned seats, I probably just have to quarantine those within 6 feet radius. We would also have the first kids on in the back of the bus, and so on and so forth. So busing would be a challenge. Busing is going to be a challenge regardless.
But
This is going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge that we have to help, and we will. We'll work with our bus company is more than willing to work with us on busing. They would obviously rather us be working with them on busing versus where they are right now. So we would have to look at what that routing would look like, especially if we're looking at, half of our alphabet coming and then the other half coming. That's something we can start working on as well.
But if you did do 4K through 5, that might make that, I guess that's, it might make it more efficient also for busing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, those are different components.
And then we'd have to figure out, like, and again, we haven't really worked out, like, we have a bus hub right now at the middle school, right? We need to get away from that, right, where kids are changing buses. So that's another piece we got to work with our bus company on. Right?
It sounds like we're in consensus that we let administration, what grades come back when, not the board deciding that.
Well, it's part of the metric.
Following the
It is,
metrics, yeah.
Right. Could not change what's on the metric, is what you're
Right.
saying.
Agreed. So what do we need, a motion?
No, the motion is made.
Motion.
Any
motion-
discussion?
The
Oh,
motion
we're
was
still in
to
the
say
middle.
or? Is that what you?
I said say or because that was the recommendation that I heard.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
And that makes sense.
I like that better than and.
So, any
We're
further
just voting on
discussion?
that part of it though.
Adopting this metric.
Right, and then are we gonna then discuss about the
And then
November
implement.
6th?
Yeah, when we would implement, do we start now or do
Yeah,
we start?
okay, so let's vote on this.
Is the metric what we want?
That's the question on the table.
Yes.
So I'm just asking, is there any further discussion?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
And I say yes. Now, when do you want to implement?
I have thoughts that it's already, what, September 16th, 17th?
So after November 4th is what we
Like
had
Vin
already-
said, it's gonna be probably high this week. So I would say we allow them to go for November 6th if that happens, because we're gonna be so close. Is it gonna matter? I mean, we're gonna be halfway through October before we
Not
can
going to
even.
matter to us. What the
Right.
question is, will it matter to parents, students, and staff? And
That's
those
true,
are
too.
questions.
I would argue parents would say as soon as possible.
Right.
That's some parents, right?
Right.
But and the other parents are gonna say, I want online, right?
But they have that choice to stay online.
Right.
Right.
Some parents are gonna say, I've made arrangements with my work through August.
Yep, so November, right. So you're right, I shouldn't say that, so there are gonna be some parents who are gonna be like, as soon as possible, some parents who are like, well, we plan on November 6th, I'd be fine with it, but other parents who are not gonna be happy at all.
But it would coincide with what Shelley was saying with a semester. So we're going to open for a week ahead of time, but I'm good through the semester, so I'm just going to stay online. Enjoy
To
it.
the quarter.
To the
She
quarter.
said
Quarter.
quarter.
Yeah.
When does the quarter end?
November 6th, that was the day, that's why we picked that day.
Yeah.
That's
right.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
that gives options, I think that broadens our possibility. Who are thinking, we gotta get our kids in school, or for the parents who are thinking, I'm gonna be online. I like it.
So,
But give us your feedback. You were in
Well,
the-
I think, again, the staff is gonna take time. The staff has been phenomenal. Let's start with that. It's gonna be a big lift for them, right? It's a whole nother instructional model, right? So something totally different. It seems like it's the same, but it's totally different what they're doing now. Time to get there. That being said, we have talked about, we would like to bring kids, we all want our kids back in school. So if we can bring kids back in school earlier than November 6th, I think we try to bring kids back to school before November 6th. I think that we follow this metric right now and we follow how it's laid out. And we're a month away from bringing kids, so you're the middle of October. So to wait till November 6th seems like that's like a artificial, that would seem like kind of a roadblock. Like, well, now you're just waiting for another 2 weeks, like, versus not the data, right? And then maybe that's the possibility as well, as you look at, we're gonna bring back for, gotta be there. But then if we bring back for 2 weeks and then you're like, okay, now you have a choice. Like with, because now you're a quarter, like, here's your online, or 3 weeks, here's your online. But it's gonna.
No easy answer.
No, so it's gonna be, right, there's no easy answer, right, so, again, there are staff members who are watching or going, oh no, and there's staff, because like, I just got my online stuff going, right? There's other staff members like, I want kids in my classroom, and they all want kids in their classroom, I shouldn't say that, they all want kids in their classroom, but how can I do this, right, and how are we gonna make this work in a way that's engaging, not in front of us, and engaging the kids that are in front of us, right, so it's.
I think if we do something like what Shelley, as long as you're not locking me into a plan for the rest of the year, even if you started 2 weeks ahead and we made it clear to parents that they can switch, school's gonna move in this direction. If you are not comfortable with that, or you have work arrangements, then here are the points in time when you can change. And we should identify all the quarters so that people know what they are. Because the same thing will happen when we go from, like, there may be some parents who just say, I look at the blended schedule, so I'm just gonna skip that. And we're okay with that, right? And we should allow that option to happen. So I would be okay with starting a little early. Plus, we're also talking about sequencing, which means that some students won't be back by November 6th, even by the, so, yeah.
Do staff have enough planning time between now and then to continue doing what they're doing and create the next?
Are those Wednesdays, will they be workable for that?
Does staff have enough planning time? No.
Well, I mean, they never do.
Right, I'm
but-
just
It's a
saying.
heavy, it's gonna be a heavy.
It's a heavy lift.
But if the metrics are showing that we want to be responsive to the data, and that's the metrics are showing, then it's on us to figure that out. And we put that planning time in this summer to develop the fence posts, the parameters, and some of the told that this is, the metrics are showing this, and this is the date that we have to be ready to go with that.
I do think another factor in all of this that fault of our own we're not discussing is we have to come out of the other side of this with our staff intact. Like, this is not an environment that we can lose staff, and we
But I also think the idea, like right now, is that you're talking a month. You're giving a staff a month to wrap, and again, it may be longer, right? We don't know, right? But at a minimum, it's a month of wrapping your head around. The hard part for staff is also going to be like, you really can't plan lessons till you know, right? So you can say, well, it's a month from now, but so you got to start having some ideas, but you're not going to really dig in and really plan. Kind of hit that 2 week period. Now we're talking about coming back. Now I'm going to really start digging a little bit more.
I can just add, I think one thing, the board, going about the way you have.
Project a little more, Nick.
Going about things the way you have, you were able to put a lot of time into developing the product that we have online, and I think about some of those districts that potentially out with full or in a blended, all of a sudden for those teachers putting all of their energy into that type of a model for the start of the year, and then having to switch all of a sudden on a dime to virtual, they're feeling a lot of that stress with a lot less planning than what we now potentially would have. Looking at this metric, having a few weeks to go virtual to what would a blended look like, it's going to put stress on our staff. And we'll help the best we can, but I also feel like we have a little than if we would have had the other route.
Yeah. Is there, sorry. I don't need to get us off on this whole tangent either, but is there discussion or possibility of looking at buying some kind of canned curriculum online programs that kids could access where, like
Like the Seesaw and some of that other
well,
stuff?
Seesaw's not an online program. I mean, that's a way to
Platform.
organize things, but I'm looking, none of them are gonna come to my mind at this
Well,
moment.
like
but-
iReady is one that we do utilize at primary, elementary, and middle school. All of those are good pieces to reinforce content that has already been delivered by the instructor. There's nothing like face-to-face instruction, though.
That's what I'm having a hard time understanding, which means probably a lot of other people. I'll back up a little bit and say that I don't think we're expecting everybody to be a rock star when they first go back into the next model. So that's the first thing, because they think that way, right? It's got to be the best.
Well, they're gonna want it, they want it.
They want it to be the best. So that's the first thing, is have a little leeway. The second thing is, and this is gonna sound really naive, and maybe it is, I guess I don't understand why it just wouldn't be the same as what they're doing now. It's just in.
So some of that is, right? But how you teach, how I try to do this online, I'm doing it in shorter bursts maybe than I'm doing it. The other piece is now I'm creating not just these things for my kids in front of me. I have to create things for kids who aren't in front of me right now, who are doing other things. And it has to connect back to here, but it has to push them enough so that when I bring those kids in, I'm taking that next step with them, and those other kids are now at home, and there's not a teacher to check in with them all the time. So trying to make sure that that is a really good experience, and it's not just like last spring, right? So we've heard that loud and clear. Don't make it like last spring. Blended online or at home back there, but it'll be a lot more like last spring than what it is now.
That's the part that parents have to understand.
How do you make that as engaging as possible, but it's gonna, on those days, because now there's no structure from the teacher. There might be a little bit of this year, but the teacher's not there, like, oh, we have a meeting at 8 o'clock, you gotta jump on that meeting at 8 o'clock. Oh, you got a small 9:20, yep, you gotta jump. That's not happening, because that teacher is busy interacting with those other kids that are in front of them. So that's the part that.
Stand up my statement earlier.
Yeah.
But is there
Yeah,
a way-
it is.
And I know, and I'm talking utopia, right? Because this is, everything would be in an ideal world, but talk about rearranging those classes. Can you have a second grade class, like have one teacher as the virtual teacher and one teacher?
You could, depending on the numbers, but so now if I'm, like one person, there's three questions. One is, can you have somebody just be an online teacher, right? Who's just, 20% of our kids say we're staying online. Now I'm responsible, so I take one of my second grade teachers out of the rotation. They're taking care of these 20 kids, right? And teaching them just like they are now. And and they're stressed out now with how we're doing it, right? Now you have these other kids spread out in cohort group, or blended, so they're in groups of 10, 12 kids. Well, now you're pulling another one of those teachers out of there. Now those groups just became bigger. Now, is that a possibility? It depends on the group size and how many go. That might be a possibility, but until we know for sure what kids are coming, now your groups now become bigger. Now you're almost back to a traditional model with those kids. Well, then you must be traditional, right? So.
You guys got a lot to figure
But
out.
I hadn't thought, again, I haven't thought about that so I mean, that's something we can definitely think about.
No matter what, there's a group of people who are gonna remain online because
Right,
they
absolutely.
have
We need,
issues at home where they cannot send their kid in.
yeah, we need to offer that option.
Right. And so there's gonna be a chunk that's gonna be gonna be the same throughout until COVID's gone. Because they just have things at home where they can't give it to grandparents or they can't give it to the parents. So then there's the people who are just afraid and they're gonna.
Well, and then, the issue with the K-12 are much more significant at this.
6-12 is a much more, it's a whole nother lift. I mean, it's
But, what if you're
much
taking
more significant.
AP US history, and now you've got class 2 days a week, and then you've got, like, and maybe that's a bad example, because maybe in AP US history you can do better.
So at that level, we're still working on that piece, right? So, because you can't do so much content to get through, right? And like, how do you make sure that, and a student who's really engaged and does really well in school, and it's, that works, right? You can give 2 days worth of work, and they can do it on their own pretty much, and maybe have, but for kids who struggle with that topic, that's not gonna work so well. So how do you, and what do we do for online education at that level, right? So it's, online is gonna have to be more of either we'll meet it into that classroom and you're just following along with that classroom as it goes. Because I can't pull a teacher out to teach a section of AP US history online for 4 kids. And even now where we are, can I purchase AP online? Maybe, how it depends on the lines up and when they're coming back to school, right? Because right now they're getting it online through our school. It's logistics at the high school, because of certification, and maybe that's the way I put it, because of certification levels, I need teachers who teach specific topics, where at elementary school, an elementary school teacher teaches all those topics, right? Where at high school, I need an English teacher to teach English. So I can't pull somebody out of my English department just to teach online.
So maybe just some classes are online classes.
And again, we're gonna look at that, right? So we spent time today with our 6-12 administrators having those.
So that leads us back to the date thing is,
Well, but again, I think the elementary, the K-5 level, for K-5 is.
At this point, it looks like if we brought, 6-12 wouldn't come back till after the quarter, even in October.
Right, and you talked about that earlier as a possibility of not bringing everybody. So if you don't bring everybody back at once, if you start with a group, we're gonna start with our primary and elementary school.
The teachers even need, and I don't even know this. Like, do the teachers even need like 3 days, no kids, to switch between models? Like, I'm just really having a hard time thinking of how they basically taking them from being one teacher to I'm having a hard time thinking of how they're going to do that with the Wednesdays they have between now and then. Well, they're still using those for.
It's a possibility, right? So one of the things at some point we will have to, as a district, look at is a waiver for hours and minutes of instruction. So it's something we're gonna have to explore with our teams and dig into it deeper, right? Again, and not that we haven't, because I was at home like, well, haven't you had that plan yet, right? Why don't you have that ready? And our focus since the board has made this decision, we had that plan and we have it, we need to tweak it, change. Our blended plan was like, this, we start our year blended. Well, some of those things need to come out and some of the things need to get added. But since we've made the decision to go online, our focus has been on online and making it the best possible we can do. Now we're getting that in where we need to now take that next step. So that might be a possibility that I could come back to the board and make that request.
I think the online, I've been very impressed with what is being delivered, but I think also we can attribute a
Yep.
They had this summer,
Yep.
That's why we made it
Yeah.
early enough, so.
The board,
I would just caution that we need to think about, they may need more than just these. Friday, we're ending virtual, and on Monday, we're going to.
yeah, and I think the board has been very cognizant of that throughout. As you said, the end of last year they had that. The beginning of this year, we had a lot of time for training and more time for planning. Giving them the Wednesdays, the board went with that calendar. I know I brought this to the finance committee or contractor, I can't remember, but we also offered staff 4 hours of additional paid time to work, try to make sure that they were up and ready. Last board meeting, you took some responsibilities off of teachers as well with educator effectiveness and different things like that. So we'll look into it a little bit more and have them work with the teachers and see what they need, because it's going to be different. Again, it could be different at different levels, right? 5, maybe you're right. Maybe there's a couple days you have for K through 5 not come at all or not be engaged, but 6-12 still engaged because we're still staying online, right? That's a possibility, right? Or yeah, so we could absolutely look at something like that.
I have two things. One, on Wednesdays, are people that need extra help still on Wednesdays? Okay, I thought that was in place, but then I just wanted.
But in addition, at the end of the day, too.
Yeah.
There's time at the end of the
Every
day
day.
for them, every day.
Okay.
Every day there's time. Most teachers have time. And throughout their day,
Like that,
depending on where you are, right? Depending on so I shouldn't say that in such a overall fashion. It depends on the building, right? So when they're available, like high school teachers still have, they're following kind of their normal schedule. So there's still prep time that they have that fits in, and same with some of our other teachers. So, but some of them have it scheduled at the end of the day. So there's times that, and parents know those times, right? They're articulated with them. They're also, Wednesdays are part of a catch-up day. It's mainly for planning right now. Again, one of the things we heard was making sure you're coherent across the grade levels, right? So that takes a lot of making sure that we're planning at the exact same time for groups of pods of parents who are getting together and trying to make that, because kids move at different levels. But so there is time, and if anybody needs help though, they should absolutely reach out to their teacher at any time and make sure that they're asking for that help.
The only other thing I thought of was when our kids do AP classes, do they do it with others from, just the Lodi kids have their own AP class?
Yes.
So would they be able to if they wanted to take another class?
So we have in the past, what we have done at the high school level for AP kids is they have the early college, or start college now. So we've had kids who take college classes, right? So some kids have taken college classes in the past, and if we don't offer that class, we have to pay for it. We've allowed students to take stuff, different things, not just online. Like we've purchased online courses, not just AP, other courses. If it's an area of real interest for a student and we don't offer that class, we will do that as well. We've also worked with other districts. So for the example, 3 years, we've had 2 or 3 years, we've had students BC calculus. They've taken our calculus as juniors, and so we give them some options, like they could do go to Waukee, they could do start college now, or they could do an online. Try to find other options for kids as well.
Well, that's why I brought it up, because if people are listening and they're, I know everybody's laid out all this information, but you know, I'm out. Okay, that's all I needed.
I'm gonna make a motion.
Yeah,
Okay.
go for it.
Go for it.
I just seem to be doing that a lot tonight. I will make a motion that we start following the metrics as of tonight, with the conditions that return is staggered between K through 5 and 6 through 12. I'm going to say it this way, and by at least 2 weeks, unless the administration starting closer together. And the reason I'm saying that, so basically, if you guys follow the metrics, and in 4 weeks it's good and we go, and you guys say we're going, then it's a But if you said, nope, we've done all of our work, we're ready to go, we think we're prepared, then I think there does probably need to be a board meeting to approve that.
You're approving a non-staggered start.
Right. So I said it that way. Does that make sense?
So we're good to stagger a start,
Yeah, we're good to stagger a start.
unless the
And then
metrics
if you,
say different.
because I don't want to take it off the option, off. I need to be.
Well, and again, if, for example, again, we're not expecting the metric system, they need to be, but hopefully the following week they are, and that would put us pretty close to the next board meeting as well.
And I don't
right?
think we've proven we're not opposed to being called to have a meeting to talk about this.
Speak for yourself.
Oh,
Special meeting.
I might be opposed to it.
We have to
No, I
amend it to say
appreciate that.
4K though. 4K
I'm sorry,
through
4K,
5.
yeah.
4K.
4K through 5.
I'll second.
Okay, so a motion by Stephen and a second by Barb.
Yes.
Further discussion? It's got that motion, right? No,
Is that out of line? I mean, I'm willing to
No,
be.
I think it makes sense. I would agree. You talked about a staggered start. I think bringing everybody back at the same time is gonna cause some logistics, right? So busing's an issue, right? So we gotta figure that out. Food service is an issue. So starting slowly, like half of our district coming back at a time makes sense, right? I have a hard time believing we're gonna bring back everybody at once, right? So it just, because we wanna see like work, just like we did for summer school. Like the reason we opened our grounds up was we could try things, right? We could do the screener. Well, we learned that there's some things in the screener we didn't need. We could, yep, that worked really well. Or, and then we did summer school. We had some in-person summer school, and we started a couple classes like what worked well, what didn't work so well, right? Going out and wiping down the playground by hand didn't work so well, right? Let's get a sprayer. It works pretty well, right? So you learn things, and as you walk through it, so I think the same thing would go, again, elementary is different than middle school, high school, but you'll learn a lot of the same logistical pieces. And there's a bigger risk to bring high school and middle schoolers back. Again, as I shared before, the chances of them going out, a big group of them going out, is greater. And again, one of the things we want to stay away from is bouncing kids back and forth, because that really is hard on families. I mean, this is hard. I mean, it's hard on families now. I'm not, again, I can't underscore that enough. It's really hard on families. It'd be harder if we bring kids back and a week later we're back online. Or if your kid, you just found out and your kids are quarantined for 14 days. Or those pieces. And some of that's gonna happen. Regardless of what we do,
Anyway, yeah.
it's gonna happen anyway. Some pieces of that are gonna happen, but the amount of that is gonna be part of it.
Well, and I think we can also talk, I mean, we can also say, you know, if you want to be in school, do the things that we're.
Yeah, that point can't be stressed enough, is we are now, the public needs to do their part. Kids need to do their part. Reporting is important, testing is important, wearing masks is important, all those things are important.
So if you want to be in school, do it right, man.
12 days when the mask rule expires, we still need to wear masks in this community.
We already established that, right? Like for
In our schools.
Right, like
Well,
that's what.
it's still on here, right?
Yeah, we're getting to that part.
Right,
Okay,
but
we got another
but for
part.
our staff
Another
right
part.
now, it's required, and everybody else, we're gonna talk about a masking requirement.
But what I'm saying is the community needs
Community,
to
yeah.
still wear masks.
Yeah.
If we're gonna be bringing these kids back.
Okay, let's talk about what we gotta talk about, because I think
We
we're all
have to
done.
vote first.
Oh, we have to
Further
vote.
discussion,
I didn't know we saw more.
Oh, darn it.
any further discussion on this? Barb,
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes,
Julie?
Yes.
Adam says yes, passes 7-0.
6-0.
6-0.
'cause Bill's
6-0,
not here.
Bill's
Bill's
not
not
here.
here.
Thank you. Sorry, Bill.
What's next?
Oh, I didn't know we had more.
I think that's it for metrics and bringing kids back to school. Face covering recommendation, because just as you guys just got done talking about, The state order for masking ends in 12 days. We have requirements in our COVID procedures for staff that they have to wear masks at this point. We are requiring all of our students to do it, and anybody who's wearing masks. So we have something to go back on.
I'll make a motion
I
that,
want to add one thing before you make a motion, okay? So this motion says that you're approving face coverings requirements as presented. And in the presented, it says that you can have an exemption to not wear a face mask on a medical basis or a religious basis. So I did a deep dive in religious basis for not wearing a mask, and there is nothing to support that. Zero. No one, anywhere.
no information.
Anywhere. No, there's
no
information
religion, but-
all over the place, but there's nothing to support a religious, nothing. So there are people out there who say, I'm using a religious exemption to not. There's nothing in the religion that says you don't wear a mask. There's nothing to support the religious part of this. And so I would make a motion to pull that part out. There are reasons to not wear a mask for medical reasons. There are no religious ones. That's the deep dive that I did, and I could not find a single thing.
So did you make
Sounds
that
like
as
you're
a
gonna make a
motion?
motion.
Yeah. All right, so I'll make a motion to approve the face covering requirements as presented without the religious exemption.
I'll second that.
And just for people at home who aren't looking at that, it requires all staff members, students, visitors, age 5 and older, including parents and guardians on facilities owned or operated by the district, and in attendance at district-sponsored events or activities wear face coverings. And then there's more wording and things like that, and there's exemption for that, as Adam just said, for medical, and then staff members who are in a room by themselves with the door closed are allowed to remove their face cover. Science people, or just like the state order, a staff member who is in front of a class, have their face open and they're over 6 feet away. But the minute they get within 6 feet, they have to put the mask back on. And then we would also look at like recess times as possible.
We're okay with 4K kids not wearing a mask.
Okay. Are they gonna wear them anyway? And they're wearing them? I mean, you got.
So the rule says, if you touch your mask, you must wash 1,000 times tonight. Right, and if you remove your mask, which we've done, unfortunately, during this meeting, you're supposed to do it. And so it's incredibly difficult to follow these rules, incredibly.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, I get it.
Staff members
Yeah.
to know that they're coming to work with children that they asked, given the recent study that just came out saying,
How did it go during the summer with 4K?
They wear masks.
They wore masks.
Yeah. So we can, I mean, you can change this to
So
4K.
I would amend my motion, because no one seconded it yet.
Right.
I would-
Angie did.
Oh, Angie did, yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I will amend my motion to go to 4K.
Well, I had a question about, while actively teaching and 6 feet away.
That is in the state order.
It is in the state.
Yep, so I followed the state order on that. So again, so the state order talks about educational, theatrical, anything like that. If you're presenting one person and there's nobody, you mask. Now, again, we wouldn't, it just sometimes, like, even in this room, right? There's times, Vince speak up. Well, if I have a group of kids in front of me and I have them spread out in the room so they can hear in the back, I may need to project a little bit more and have that mask off.
Doesn't seem okay to be projecting.
Yeah, I
and
know.
without a mask,
I
even
know.
if you're 6,
That makes it worse.
right.
The thing
But
is,
it does say that when a staff member is providing services in which a mask
And again, it just says may, it doesn't say they have to remove their, right? Again, staff are gonna be, they're gonna be very cognizant, they're very safety conscious of their students.
What about eating?
You cannot eat with a mask. They must eat at lunchtime.
They stay 6 feet away and eat in their classrooms, right? Away from each other
So-
with no mask.
So
Is
if
that
they're
what's happening
eating,
in?
They take their mask off to eat, and as soon as my building is 4K. It 6 feet apart, maybe 8 feet apart, all facing one way.
No, there's no easy answers.
No, I think,
There's no
I
simplicity.
think we have to do it this way, and
Well, and again, this is, the idea behind this for the district, we are requiring masks, right? So we are not going to be standing over somebody, like if they're gonna drink a water, like you can't, I mean, follows as people being able to eat, drink, like, you know, but the idea behind it is, we have this rule in our district that you have to wear a mask if you're coming to an event, if you're coming. I think, again, I'm not, I would be worried about some of our students when they come in, that the parents are, they don't have to wear a mask. Well, and again, we can make that accommodations for them, right? It's really easy. You don't want to wear a mask, there's an online option. That's our option. That's part of coming to school. But it's more for visitors and other people coming into our district that you need to have a mask.
and I think it's important to bring up in this meeting, we talked about the facilities finance committee meeting, but part of what we're putting into place is layers. So, and we all know the first layers, which is wash your hands. But then on top of that, there's air cleaning, there's trying to turn the air over enough times in a room so that you're evacuating any bad stuff. There's filtering it, which is why we upgraded our filters. And then there's the last that's called scrubbing, which is cleaning the air that's in the room at the time. If you do all of those things, and all of those things, not a single one of those things prevents COVID-19 from spreading. But each one of them, if we can get each one up to a level, start to make it really difficult. And so that should help people feel more comfortable coming back. And if, for teachers too, if a mask comes off, it's not the end of the world. As long as it goes right back on again, it's not like we have to shut down and the people raid the room and spray everything down. But yeah, so I think it's the layers of protection, and the mask is one of those, and it's a very important one that has been
Really
proven.
important one.
when people talk about, these are my rights, well, no shirt, no shoes, no service, gotta wear a seatbelt.
It's part of the dress code. It's the same thing
It's
as the
just
dress code.
anything, it's like anything else, and for this.
So I amended my motion down to 4K.
4K.
Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you have to say something special?
Oh, just have to say that your second still stands.
Everything you say is special.
And on that motion is still valid.
Okay.
Okay. Stephen,
Yes.
Angie.
Yes.
Kelly, Julie.
Yes.
And Adam says yes, so 6-0 passes. What else you got for us
What else is
tonight,
on here?
man?
That's it?
That's it?
What?
Yeah, it's not even 10 o'clock yet.
You made this a lot easier than it could have been. So thank you for
I don't
all the
even
work.
wanna know.
Nick, thank you
I'm
as
sure I
well
wanna know
for
how many
everything.
hours.
You guys did great.
I do just want to say Vince's time
Yes.
going over the metrics and the data, putting all
It's a labor of love, looking at numbers.
And for not having the background, as you stated over and over.
Well, I need to, and I'm sure she's not listening, but Jean went a lot of this time. And sometimes we push back each other once in a while, a little bit more, you know, like, and I think I've used this term with Jean before. Sometimes I don't, and I got in trouble with Jean this summer for one time saying, Jean, I don't always appreciate what you say. And then we got interrupted, right? And then later she called me, she's like, well, I need to follow up. I'm like, no, sometimes I'm in a meeting and I don't appreciate what you say. And I gotta push back, it's like, oh, I didn't think of that. So it was like, you had to walk through that whole conversation, and, so I've said, you know, sometimes like, she'll tell me something like, oh, Jean, and then I'll be like, oh, she's right, you know, and of course she's right. She's, more often than I am, so it's like, okay, I gotta think back to, and she has done her due diligence on all of our COVID things, like, it's been phenomenal, the amount of time she's put in, and, the amount of effort she has, and our staff has the utmost confidence in what she's doing, and so I really appreciate, she deserves a lot of credit for all the work we're doing, so.
I was happy to see all of the things that were done. I think people that are gonna look at the slideshow are gonna be very happy about it.
I'll second.
Motion by Barb, second by
Yes.
Stephen. Any further discussion? Barb?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Adam says yes.
Yes, yes. Julie?
Julie
Yes.
says yes. 6-0, we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.